NFL stars that were backstabbed by their teams. I mean, the NFL, it's a business for sure. So they're going to make business decisions which might not always be in the favor of their athletes. But at the same time, you know, if you've made a commitment to a player, like if you've given them a contract, surely the contract has to be honored. You know, I'm really interested to see what was the exact thing that the teams did to backstab the players here.
The NFL is a cutthroat business. We've all seen it many times over now.
First reaction, Eli being benched.
Somebody's stupid right now.
But did he deserve to be benched at that point? He must have.
So let us take a look back at 10 NFL stars that got absolutely backstabbed by their team. Brian Urlacher, LB, Chicago Bears. The Bears' relationship with Brian Urlacher should have ended with a ceremony at midfield. Well, instead, they lowballed him into retirement.
Honestly, I probably would have played another year there if that's the way it had been handled, but I was so mad at the way it was handled, and I thought it was just wrong the way it all went down.
They offhandedly shoved a $2 million offer in his face, knowing full well that he had deep roots in the Chicago area and was unlikely to move cities at this point in his career. Urlacher ultimately decided to retire rather than play under what he took as a very disrespectful offer.
They countered with their offer. My agent said, well, that's not anywhere close to what we were thinking, so we made another offer. And they said, no, this is the offer, so take it or leave it.
Now keep in mind, Urlacher was Chicago football. 13 years, 8 Pro Bowls, 1 Defensive Player of the Year award. The dude literally put his body through hell for that franchise. So when his contract was up in 2013, he expected at least some level of respect. But of course, this is the Chicago Bears that we're talking about. And they just always seem to find the wrong way to go about things. Steve McNair, QB, Tennessee Titans.
I mean, the thing with the Urlacher situation, was he playing the prior season? Was he playing the kind of football that warranted a much larger financial offer? Because usually, I would have thought that NFL teams, you know, their prized assets, they do tend to pay him well. Like, look at the contract that Pat Mahomes has got. Like, did he deserve more money?
Late 90s and the early 2000s, Steve McNair wasn't just the Titans quarterback, he was their leader, their identity, the heart and soul of that team. He was there when the franchise moved to Tennessee, took them to a Super Bowl, and played through every single injury imaginable just to keep them competitive. And when they decided that they were ready to move on, they decided to throw that all out the window and quite literally locked him out of the building, having security guards tell him rather than an honest conversation from the front office. Yeesh, now that is yesteryear's version of finding out on social media. Just literally some random staffer telling the franchise's most important player for over a decade that the team banned him from working out at their facility because, they didn't want him getting hurt before they could trade him. A warning, no conversation, just security guards at the door telling their franchise QB to hit the road. Richard Sherman.
There has to be more context to that story. Someone please, they literally just didn't allow him to train? That's crazy. Surely there's more.
CB, Seattle Seahawks. The Legion of Boom was not built overnight. No, it took years of talent, chemistry, and sheer dominance to turn the Seahawks defense into the terrifying Super Bowl winning force that it became. And Richard Sherman was at the center of it, both production and identity-wise. Sherman was the defining player of Seattle's golden era, a trash-talking, game-breaking, playmaking machine that gave the Seahawks their edge. But once things got a little tough, Seattle's front office turned on him without even offering to negotiate a deal. And let's not forget, Sherman had just torn his Achilles. The dude literally destroyed his body for that team. And, well, their response was just to kick him out the door before he even got a chance to recover. To make matters worse, they also chose to let the narrative play out in the media that Sherman was leaving under his own volition, or was unwilling to restructure his deal. And of course, adding insult to injury here was the reality that they did this largely to acquiesce to Russell Wilson, who had been butting heads with Sherman, along with others in recent years. Yeah, Sherman absolutely did not deserve this kind of shoddy treatment. Joe Montana.
Yeah, man. I remember the whole Legion of Boom. Like, the Seahawks, they were dominant for that 2-3 year period. And he definitely was, I would say, the leader of the Legion of Boom. Him, Cam Chancellor. Like, yeah, they... Again, there's probably a lot of context that we don't know. But yeah, it kind of feels like they did do him dirty. Would you agree?
QB, San Francisco 49ers. Joe Montana built the 49ers dynasty. 4 Super Bowls, 3 MVPs, the most clutch quarterback of his generation. And yet, San Fran did the unthinkable and shipped him off to Kansas City. Yeah, sure, Steve Young was waiting in the wings. And yeah, Montana had been dealing with injuries. But come on, let's be real. This wasn't just about making a football decision. The 49ers wanted a clean break, and they were not willing to let Montana go out on his own terms. Montana took the Chiefs to their first AFC Championship game in forever. Meanwhile, San Francisco spent the next few years trying to justify a move that never sat right with the fans. That is, until Young got over the hump and won a Super Bowl of his own. But still, after everything that Montana meant to that organization and fan base, it is crazy to think that they thought it was okay to just stab him in the back like that. Randy Moss, WR.
Man, NFL teams really, it just seems like very ruthless, maybe a bit more ruthless than the professional football teams here in England, like the Premier League teams, although I'm sure these teams are ruthless in their own way. But when players get hurt, there is a tendency to sign them on for like another year if they're at the end of their contract, so that while they heal they're still earning a living. Seems like at least we're seeing from this video that teams tend to cut players when they get really, really hurt.
Minnesota Vikings. Despite all of the noise and narrative around who Randy Moss was as a man and a teammate, particularly early in his career, the notion that he wanted out of Minnesota was a departure from the truth. Moss was still well in his prime. He was a generational talent. Yeah, sure, he had some locker room issues, but nothing that warranted blowing up that relationship. If the team had any real commitment to winning, man, they would have figured it out. This would be like today's Vikings deciding that Justin Jefferson just wasn't worth the trouble and shipping him out of town against his will. What made this all the more painful for Vikings fans was that the real reason was that then owner Red McCombs shipped him out of town because of an ugly business dealing between him and the state of Minnesota. McCombs allegedly had been in an ugly battle with the local government, demanding public funding for a new stadium. And when he didn't get what he wanted, he took it out on his own team by shopping Moss behind everyone's back, subsequently sending him to Oakland and then watching his team crumble without Larry's.
That's crazy. So because he couldn't get funding for the stadium, he got rid of one of his best players, if not his best player. That is, I mean, look, I hate to call a billionaire dumb, but that was a dumb decision, no?
Csonka, RB, Miami Dolphins. Larry Csonka left Miami in 1975 for a payday with the Memphis Southmen in the World Football League, followed by an admittedly rough stint with the Giants. But when 1979 rolled around, Miami's prodigal son made his way back to the Dolphins on what would now be described as a one-year prove-it deal. And, well, to his credit, prove it he did, rushing for 837 yards and a career-high 13 touchdowns, 12 on the ground and 1 receiving tutter to top it off. It should have been a storybook comeback. The front office should have rewarded him. The fans should have gotten another few years of Csonka running over defenders in a Dolphins jersey. Instead, owner Joe Robbie lowballed him so hard that it triggered a massive falling out between the two sides. When all was said and done, Csonka ended up choosing retirement over disrespect. Peyton Manning, QB.
It is quite a thing where these players like Urlacher and this guy, Csonka, turning down money because they feel insulted and retiring, because by retiring, they're not going to earn anything. But I guess that sense of injustice is stronger than the desire for, an additional couple million if they've already earned, many millions over their career.
Indianapolis Colts. Peyton Manning was the Indianapolis Colts. 4-time MVP, a Super Bowl ring, the guy who turned a laughingstock franchise into an absolute powerhouse. And the second that he got hurt, well, the organization turned their attention to tanking for his replacement. Manning's neck injury in 2011 had the Colts front office spooked, and instead of waiting to see if the greatest quarterback in franchise history could get healthy, they saw their chance to grab Andrew Luck and ditched Manning before he even had a chance to prove that he was back.
That's crazy. How old was Manning at this point? Was it feasible that he would, heal from the injury and still be as good or close to as he was? Or was he really sort of like old and, the argument was that the injury was a, finishing of his career?
Well, Manning went to Denver, won another MVP, set single-season passing records, and then won a Super Bowl.
So clearly he still had a lot of juice left in him. bad decision.
Meanwhile, the Colts, well, they wasted Luck's career, and their franchise still, to this day, has not recovered. Well, if you ask me, that's their just desserts for such a cold-blooded move to such an important player in the franchise's history. DeAndre Hopkins,
What a terrible decision. Shocking.
WR, Houston Texans.
Like, as NFL fans, if any NFL fans are watching this, like, how do you feel about, the team's decisions here? Do you support them, or do you think, like, what were the owners thinking?
Long before Hopkins transitioned to the sort of journeyman that we know him as today, he was new. One of the best wide receivers in the game, and a cornerstone of some otherwise underwhelming Houston Texans offenses. His relationship with the franchise, however, started to sour when Bill O'Brien came to town and brought his hard-nosed, college-esque coaching style to the organization. And, well, that's also where we learned to never let Bill O'Brien handle roster decisions. DeAndre Hopkins wasn't just the best player on the Texans, he was one of the best receivers in football. The guy was a 3-time All-Pro coming off a 1,165-yard season, and he was still very much in his prime. And yet, O'Brien shipped him out for essentially nothing, getting a washed-up David Johnson and a second-round pick. To add insult to injury, Hopkins found out like the rest of us on social media. To this day, I still cannot believe that this is how it went down.
12 years in the league, man. I got traded for some pennies in my prime.
Cooper Kupp, WR, Los Angeles Rams. You can spin the latest news out of the City of Angels however you want, aging star, roster turning over, salary cap hit, and so on, but come on, the fact of the matter is, Cooper Kupp deserved better than this. For anyone who missed it, wide receiver Cooper Kupp released a statement Monday saying that he was informed by the Los Angeles Rams that the team is seeking to trade him immediately. Fresh off their painful playoff exit at the hands of the eventual Super Bowl champion Eagles, the Rams informed Kupp that they were actively shopping him, basically saying, hey, thanks for the memories, but we're moving on. No real warning, no negotiation, no graceful exit, just a one-way ticket out of town. Now, if we're being fair, it is, as they say, a business. And, well, the injuries have piled up.
So he's injury prone. I mean, this is the thing. Can you really be angry at a team for looking at their players and judging them against how many injuries they've had, weighing up how much they're going to be unavailable potentially in the future? This is just business, honestly. I get, they got to make business decisions.
Kupp has missed 18 games in the last 3 seasons, and his production has really dipped. But still, come on, this is Cooper freaking Kupp. If anyone deserved to be treated with some dignity, it was him. And Matthew Stafford is not happy about this. Those two were inseparable both on and off the field. The Rams might be doing what's best for their books, but as far as backstabs go, this one hurts. Eli Manning.
I don't know. Is this a backstab, though? I'm not sure if you can call that one a backstab. I think that's just a shrewd business move. Or what do you guys think?
QB, New York Giants. While this one really tied back to a coach trying to save his job, Ben McAdoo, a name that still churns many Giants fans' stomachs, the Giants ownership should have done more to insert themselves and protect their longtime quarterback, who, lest we forget, led them to 2 Super Bowl championships. Because if there is one player who should have never been benched mid-season, it was Eli Manning. The guy was a franchise legend and tough as nails for a quarterback. He never complained, no matter how bad his offensive line got. But that didn't stop McAdoo from benching him for Geno Smith and snapping his consecutive start streak. Yeah, Geno Smith.
Man, he looks so much like his brother here. So much like his brother.
Was not about performance. This was a coach trying to save his job by making a desperation move. Giants ownership should have stepped in, but instead, they let McAdoo throw their franchise quarterback under the bus. But which NFL stars do you think were backstabbed worst by their teams? Were there any that you think were better off?
Interesting video. I do think that some of these players, for sure, it was a backstab, but yeah, it's a tough one here, because this is where the line between sport and business gets a bit blurred. These NFL teams are ultimately businesses, right? That have to make decisions that are best for the finances of the team, because if they consistently make bad financial decisions, they could be in real trouble. So on the one hand, how sorry can you feel for a player that's made millions and millions of dollars if they get traded? is it really that big of a deal? But on the other hand, if that player has really given you everything and is still good, you know, like Peyton Manning was, why give that up? Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.